Hi everybody, this is Dr. Christina Welter again and Dr. Barney Turnock. We are here for a second short segment on performance management and public health. This segment we wanted to ask Dr. Turnock about his opinion of the current state of public health and performance management. There have been a lot of reports issued from the IOM and otherwise on performance management and quality improvement over the last decade. I'm not going to walk through each of those one by one. We'll cover some of those in class. But specifically wanted to ask Dr. Turnock with the implementation of ACA and the recent IOM report that came out in 2010 that spoke to a measurement in public health, what he thought that the recommendations meant for governmental public health. Do they help? Do they hinder? Are they realistic? And whatnot. So just your gut reactions to these recommendations.
Well, the recent IOM recommendations regarding measurement for public health system, public health practice are really comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they really cover the waterfront. They're very thoughtful. I'm not sure how feasible they are, or how widely accepted they will be. I think it will take some time, but they certainly hit all the right notes about the kinds of information that's really necessary to be able to relate conditions that influence health with interventions, including public health interventions. And so the extent to which they draw attention to a number of the social and environmental, the basic fundamental causes, the social determinants of health, and the importance of tracking those things and developing models for how various changes in some of those social determinants impact populations, and how various kinds of interventions might be modeled into that kind of a framework to determine which ones might have greater or lesser effects on population health are really, really important, and I think that's one of the real high notes of the report itself. The difficulty of doing that is it can't be underestimated. It's a monumental task, but I can't recall anywhere or any time that broad a view of the kinds of data and information that's useful for developing and tracking and evaluating interventions that influence health. It's never been around before, so it's groundbreaking. And because of that, it may take some time, but it's definitely the right note at the right time.
So what you're talking about is that there was a set of recommendations not only to have one set of measures across the nation for community health improvement, but linking in social determinants of health to tell the whole progression of the story, as well as pulling in data from the EMR, the electronic medical records, and sort of the health information exchanges to help then fill in those measures to tell the whole story. Yeah.
Exactly, Christina. I mean, we tend to look at these things very myopically and view, information from the clinical sector, for instance, as the answers to the questions, when there's really actually a relatively small level of improvement of health status that's going to come out of the Affordable Care Act and even the expanded access to health care. It'll help, but it won't greatly address the kinds of health issues and health problems that this country and most others face. And so to begin to focus on those social determinants and fundamental causes that actually influence health in populations, and to bring that into the equation is groundbreaking. And but there are other more, I guess, realistic or feasible recommendations included in that panel that would have to do with better defining, community health and population health, and the impacts or effects of changes in the healthcare delivery system that are probably be achievable more easily or more quickly, but are probably not nearly as important.
So if you were a state or local health department director, which you have been, what would you do a couple things to prepare for such recommendations, knowing it is down the long term, 5, 10, 20 years even? At the same time, so that's kind of standalone question, but keeping in mind the current push in public health is quality improvement, which is the smaller, really cyclical process that's far away, or maybe that's my judgment, perceived for me, far away from these IOM recommendations. So what would you do to prepare, and then how does this movement for QI fit into those large recommendations?
Well, that's really complicated. I would start with some of the simpler stuff. I mean, to me, one of the simplest steps, although it's not easily achievable in its own right, is to get or require all states to mandate, expect, require their local health departments to become accredited. I think a rapid expansion of the National Voluntary Accreditation Program for local health departments and for state health departments is a very doable and immediate step that can be taken to move things along while some of these more complex recommendations are considered, because we really don't have the kind of analytical skills and modeling and frameworks to do all of the things that the IOM recommended in terms of measurement, but in terms of kind of basic public health practices at state and local level, the accreditation program is a major opportunity. It's right before us, and it's moving along, but it needs to move along a lot faster.
Say a little bit more about my second question there, in terms of, and really this is where I want to ask the question about the current state of public health performance management. In the 1990s, early 2000s, a lot of work was done, Illinois really being a leader in this, on developing performance management frameworks and systems, and that very quickly moved into then pushing for quality improvement, which is certainly a part of performance management. Where would you say we are now, knowing performance management is probably a bit less of a priority, and QI is more focused on that? And what's your opinion on it? Is it good? Is it bad? Does it matter?
Well, it's good and it matters. Is it far along? Not particularly. If we were in our infancy in the 1990s, I'm not sure we've hit adolescence yet. And it's certainly uneven across the country in terms of states and localities, and I suppose that relates to the unevenness of the state local public health systems across the country. So I think we're moving along, but I wouldn't say rapidly, but steadily.
Do you think there's a good connection today between performance management and QI, or are we focused mostly on QI?
Well, I think there's a good relationship, and certainly within the kind of traditional public health community, I think it's well recognized and moving ahead. So I think it's well accepted, and it's just like a lot of things. If it's left to move ahead at its own speed, it'll take us another 150 years until we realize the potential.
And just last question, where do you see local state public health in performance management in, like, say, 5 to 10 years in an ideal state? What would you imagine, given the IOM recommendations, accreditation, all these other movements?
Well, I certainly see it advanced. Public health is very much of an information-driven business, and the people who work in it and the programs and services that are offered through that system are just so heavily information dependent that it's a crime not to use the information that you have and that you've acquired to make things better, to make the program better, to make the results of the program better, which is what performance management and quality improvement are together all about. So I think as the enterprise becomes more information laden, that performance management, performance measurement, and quality improvement will become more and more central to how these organizations operate.
Great, thanks.